Hello and welcome back to another episode of Commentator's Corner. I'm Tyler Reedy, along with Brendan Preisman, and it's probably been a while since you've seen us, but we're back, and you probably know why, because basketball season's about ready to get underway, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Rankings just got out. Prep's the number 3 team in the state. I see that as a fairly appropriate ranking. I think this team could go pretty far this year, and so do a lot of the people I've talked to. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so just before we filmed this, about 15 minutes before they put the rankings out for basketball this year, Prep, of course, last year lost in the first round of the state tournament to Westside, but this time, starting the 2020-2021 season, they're 3 spots ahead of the Warriors at number 3, Miller North, Bellevue West at 1 and 2, Papio South at 4, Central at 5, Westside at 6, but Creighton Prep, they've got basically their entire team minus one player, Spencer Schomer's coming back. I mean, they've got all kinds of experience, all kinds of well-rounded talent, and the rankings show that, putting them at number 3, so really jumping out.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to get an interview with Coach Ludke a few weeks before this, and I talked about, what does he think about this team's ceiling, given that they're an experienced team coming off a tough playoff loss, but they bring back basically everybody. And he thinks that because of their experience, he said they've got 7 of their top 8 guys returning. He thinks that because of their experience, this team potentially could win it all. This team is on course to do what those teams, referring to 2009, 2015, 2018, those state champion teams did. So Coach Ludke, along with many other people, including myself, think that a state title is the ceiling for this team, and there's a lot of talent on it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard a whole lot about just rumors around the building about how the basketball team's going to be, because we haven't been in-person school for the last month or so. So, it's been hard to gauge exactly the hype going into this season just around the school. But you and I, we've been talking about it since June. This could be the year for the Prep basketball team. They've got basically their whole team coming back, starters-wise, all kinds of experience. And then the schedule is really nice, too, because Creighton Prep, with the rankings coming out, they play the number 2 team, Bellevue West, number 4, Papillion La Vista South, number 5, Omaha Central, and number 6, Omaha Westside, all at home this year, a place where they went 10-1 a season ago. So things are really looking good.
Yeah, I also did manage to talk to Coach Ludke about that in our interview a little bit. I talked to him about how potentially having no fans or limited fans at the home games could affect either positively or negatively the games that the team is going to play. And he said that the important thing for the team was that they rely on themselves and not the fans to get the job done, because the fans can be a big boost to the team. But if you're relying on the fans every time to get you over the hump, then you're probably not as good as your record says you are. But hopefully Prep is going to be able to match or improve that home record from last year. I think it's definitely doable.
Yeah, so just speaking about fans, football season, you saw they eventually allowed students of all grade levels into the games for the playoffs until they got to the semifinals and finals. But for Prep's last game against Millard South, there was a maximum capacity, but students of all grade levels could come in, but they've wiped basically everything clean student-wise going into basketball season, with it being an indoor sport and with the uptick in cases not only at Creighton Prep but in the county and city overall. So a maximum of 4 family members allowed per player, and that's it. And then us, of course, to bring you the game. Fortunately, we're very thankful we can do that this year, but it's definitely going to be a different feeling.
It definitely will be, but we're glad to get to do it. There was actually some debate over whether we would actually be able to do it, but luckily they decided that they'd let us in, and really thankful for that. Yeah, really nice to be able to call basketball games again.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with how good the team's looking going into this year. So it starts off Thursday night against Grand Island, a team that wasn't really the best on paper last year. They were a borderline top 10 team, not totally on Prep's level, but they played Prep tough last year, really tough. A buzzer beater win at the Hyder Center, Prep's only home loss all season last year back in February. And then in the district finals, also at the Hyder Center, they took Creighton Prep to overtime. I think Spencer Schomer scored 31 or 32. Creighton Prep won that game to go to the state tournament. But even though Creighton Prep definitely looks like the better team on paper, could always be interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, during my season preview, I was looking at teams that Prep would have to watch out for, and I had four. The top two teams that you mentioned, Bellevue West and Millard North. West Side, because you've always got to watch out for West Side because the West Side Prep rivalry. It's far more of a rivalry in basketball than it is in football, but in basketball, it's a lot of fun to watch. And then I had Grand Island, and that all really comes down to one guy. Their rising junior, Isaac Trout. He is an incredible basketball player. Last year, as a sophomore, managed to take the starting role on varsity and ended up leading the team in scoring with about 17 points a game. Also had about 6 rebounds and 2 assists. Scored 33 points in one of those games against Prep. So he's definitely got the talent. The issue is a lot of the other talent from that team is gone. 6 of their top 7 guys in the scoring, assisting, and rebounding categories were seniors last year. So they're all gone. It's just him. This is his team, and we'll get to see what he can do with it on Thursday night.
Yeah, these two teams, Prep and Grand Island, very contrasting builds. Grand Island has that one player, Isaac Trout, you mentioned. They lost, basically everybody to seniorship last year, and now they've got to bring in a bunch of juniors to try and fill those voids. Meanwhile, Creighton Prep, they're bringing everybody back. You've got 5 players that all played at least 13 minutes a game last year. You've got a rising junior in Luke Jungers, who's already got 2 Division I offers. And then you've got a bunch of other guys, 2 of them, Brendan Buckley and A.J. Rollins, over 11 points a game last year, guys that can get rebounds. Really a versatile team. They can get it done on both ends and in all parts of the offensive area of the court.
Yeah. I think Luke Jungers is really going to be the X factor to how high this team can go. And Coach Lutke kind of thinks the same. He said that Luke was going to have to play a bigger role this year, but that having a guy like Jungers, who can shoot the three-pointer very well, 51% last year, and admittedly in a limited role, that's still incredible. But being able to have Jungers out on the perimeter with A.J. Rollins running the paint, he said, will be able to open things up and enable the offense to just run and run and run. And they were a pretty high-scoring team last year. They look on pace to do it again. They shot 39% from 3 last year as a team, which is highly impressive. So it's looking like it's going to be more of the run-and-gun offense that Prep fans have become used to in recent years.
Yeah, so just talking about what we're most excited to see on Thursday night with Creighton Prep and Grand Island, I definitely can't wait to see how Creighton Prep's offense looks, because last year the ball was mostly in the hands of Spencer Shomers for 3-pointers. Everybody else was very good, but Shomers was definitely the lead guy when it came down to it. But now, all 5 players can really have the same impact. Any one player can have a big night against any given team, any given place, any given night. So it'll be interesting for me to see how they run that offense and how well they can spread the ball around. And I don't know about you, but I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. And I think Justin City is going to be a big help in that. Last year, he took kind of a back seat in the offense to guys like Rollins and Shomers, averaged 8 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. But City is a really good point guard, good facilitator, good scorer, good slasher, and he should be able to really bring the offense to another level if he's at the top of his game.
Yeah, and he can defend very well too. Led the team last year in both steals and assists, so he's a good all-around player. Basically everybody on Prep you can consider just about a good all-around player, but definitely going to be fun to watch this year. What game are you most interested in seeing this season? Because you've got a lot of good ones and a lot of good ones at home. I mentioned Westside, Bellevue West, defending state champions, coming to town. 2 more top 5 teams in Central and Papio South. So a lot of good games to pick from, but which one are you most excited for?
I think the game at Millard North on February 16th is going to be not only the most exciting, but also the most important game of the Prep season, because what that will determine is not really how good Prep is. That will have been determined by February, but how good their ceiling is in a playoff-style environment, because it's an away game. It's against a really, really good team in Millard North. If they can come out of that game with a win, then they can come out of any game with a win.
Yeah, and Millard North, even though they didn't win the state tournament last year, they finished as runner-up to Bellevue West. Omaha World Herald put them at number 1, so that's definitely going to be a good game in February, and who knows what the level of fans is going to be by then. That's the thing about this prep schedule. All of those games against top 5, top 10 teams are in 2021. So things could be looking very different by then, but should get a good game tomorrow night, or a Thursday night rather, so it'll be fun to watch.
And I do think that one of the keys for prep, not just Thursday, but throughout this entire year, is how they're going to defend the star players that other teams can throw at them. Because prep can kill you from a lot of different angles. They've got, guys like Jungers, Rollins, City, both Buckleys, Majay Wiley. So they've got, as you said, anybody who can step up and have a big game. But they're going to be facing a lot of teams who just have a player or two who just go out and have a big game. Chucky Hepburn for Bellevue West, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists last year, ended up winning the state title. Millard North, as you mentioned, runner-up, have Hunter Salas. He scored 22 points a game. He's also got a couple of good wingmen, St. Thomas and Jason Green. They both averaged in double figures. And then Grand Island with Isaac Trout, obviously. So the key thing is going to be, can prep defensively key in on a star is going to have a lot more wins than losses.
Yeah, and one more thing on Isaac Trout. He's got all the points, he did everything last year only as a sophomore. He led all Class A underclassmen, that is freshmen and sophomores. He led all underclassmen in Class A in points per game last year. That's something. And now he's got to really put that team on his back, you would think, unless Grand Island can come up with something we don't know, because outside of Isaac Trout, all of the other players last year that weren't seniors for Grand Island, not one of them scored more than 3 total points all year. It's crazy to think about what that team could look like this year, but it'll be interesting. Anything can happen when he's leading them. Yeah,
that's certainly true, and it's going to be interesting to see what that does to how the team plays in the final minutes, because last year Grand Island had a 17-8 record. 9 of those games were decided by 5 points or less, 2 of those against prep. In games decided by 5 or less, which is what normally statisticians define as like clutch time in a basketball game. Last year, they were 6-3 in those games. And one of the big reasons for that, as it is for basically every team these days, is do you have a good leader who can step up and manage to help the team keep its cool? So without a lot of those seniors, Trout is going to have to step up and do it. But if he's double teamed, then he might have to kick it out to somebody who's never taken a big shot in their high school career. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if prep is able to slow down Trout and his teammates have to step up in the clutch.
Yeah, one more thing on Grand Island. Last year, I believe they only had 1 loss outside of the district final at prep on the road last year. So they're a team that can travel well. They have to do a lot of it, obviously, being out in central Nebraska. But we'll see what they can bring on Thursday night. All right, let's talk about the NFL now, because we've had quite the interesting week. Thanksgiving week, just this past week, beginning the month of December. And as we're speaking right now, it's Wednesday afternoon at 3:20. There's a football game going on, Ravens and Steelers. How about that?
It's 7-6. End of the first quarter.
Yeah, so Ravens and Steelers playing right now. They were supposed to play the Thanksgiving night game last Thursday. That got moved to Sunday. Then it got moved to Tuesday, and now it got moved to Wednesday, and they're actually playing it right now. So the only undefeated team left in football is trying to hang on despite the Ravens' COVID-19 situation, making all kinds of changes to that game. But that should be a good one. Ravens trying to hold on to their playoff lives in the wild card spot after being the best regular season team in the NFL last year. And then some of the games from Sunday, the one a lot of people were talking about was Chiefs-Buccaneers, with Tyreek Hill going off for 200 receiving yards in the first quarter alone. And then Tom Brady nearly making a comeback. 27-24 was the final in favor of Kansas City. And that was one of the most hyped up games all season, regardless of whether or not there would be full capacity in the stadium. What did you make of that game?
Well, what I thought is that it told me that if the Chiefs are at the top of their game, no other team in the NFL really stands a chance, because that first quarter, just an incredible showing from the Chiefs offense, especially Hill, as you mentioned. Mahomes was throwing the ball to anyone and everyone. And the Buccaneers, game wasn't really that close until the fourth quarter, when Mike Evans had 2 unanswered touchdowns, which I sorely needed to win my fantasy matchup this week. So thank you, Mike Evans. But I think that the Chiefs at the top of their game are on a different level than the rest of the NFL. And the first half of that game against the Buccaneers proved that.
Yeah, and then speaking of the AFC West, the only team that's had the Chiefs number this year, the Las Vegas Raiders, beat the Chiefs back in Week 5 to hand them their only loss of the season. They got clobbered by the Falcons, a team that we've been making jokes about for blowing leads all season. Falcons beat the Raiders 43-6. What in the world, right?
I mean, Dan Quinn's finally gone for the Falcons, so, I guess maybe. Holding Josh Jacobs to 27 rushing yards in the entire game will be a big help to a team, especially if Derek Carr can struggle or is struggling, and the Falcons just ended up winning the game. Speaking of fired coaches, the Lions finally pulled the trigger on the Matt Patricia era after a Thursday night beatdown against Houston. Deshaun Watson probably had his best game of the year without a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. Who knows what that offense could look like if you had DeAndre Hopkins. It's too bad that he's on the Cardinals, though, because imagine if the Texans had him. What could that be like?
Well, they'd probably be in the hunt for the AFC North or the AFC South. They'd be a playoff team, so...
Yeah, anyways, Texans also lost another receiver thanks to Will Fuller's suspension for performance-enhancing drugs, so that's not terrific. And then the NFC least continues to impress people. The football team got a win over the Cowboys, which forced Jerry Jones, I think a couple hours ago it was, or maybe it was yesterday, to make a comment basically saying, I guess now we know what the Broncos feel like. Because, the Cowboys have a tough quarterback situation and the Broncos have a tough quarterback situation. It's basically comparing apples to the planet Earth, but, there's iffy quarterback situations. And then the New York Giants got a win outside the division somehow against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are reeling from the loss of Joe Burrow, obviously. But Giants also faced a quarterback injury. Daniel Jones went down with a hamstring injury in the second half. Colt McCoy is now the starting quarterback.
Oh, gosh.
The Texas alumni. So who knows? He could be the starter for a playoff team. And then, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles lost in the Monday night game. DK Metcalf basically said to that team, "You didn't draft me. You're going to regret that for the rest of your lives." And then basically did that. Carson Wentz still leads the NFL in interceptions. And I think for the Eagles, it might be time to just start tearing things up.
Well, I think we said that about every NFC East team at least once this season. But as it stands right now, the Giants with a 4-7 record are leading that division. You mentioned the Denver Broncos and their quarterback situation. They were the talk of the league going into Sunday because they had a positive COVID-19 test in their quarterback room in the days leading up to their game against the Saints. And they didn't have a quarterback on their roster going into the game. They had to call up Kendall Hinton, who played quarterback in college, to act as their quarterback, at least throwing passes. They started the game with a bunch of wildcat runs, but Saints blew them out 31-3. And I think Denver only had, let me see how many completions. Yeah, one completion, 9 attempts, 13 yards, 2 interceptions. So when you throw more interceptions than completions, not a good day. So Broncos just trying to move on.
You can't really blame Kendall Hinton, though. He was, I believe, working in sales earlier this year, and then the Broncos, who he is on the practice squad as a receiver for, call him up like, "Hey, you know how you played quarterback in college? You want to do that again? Oh, by the way, the game's tomorrow." I think he did about as well as possible under the circumstances. But that does make the playoff race in the NFC look rather intriguing, with now the Saints having a lead over the Seahawks and the Packers for that 1 seed right now. Playoff race starting to look very interesting in both conferences, to be honest. It's a logjam for the wild card spots. There's now 7, of course, but you could reasonably say that any team from 5th to 10th in the AFC deserves a wild card spot, because that's Browns, Dolphins, Colts, Ravens, Raiders, and Patriots. And all 5 of those teams have looked like playoff teams at some point this year. And then the NFC, it's a little bit different. You've got the Rams, the Buccaneers, Cardinals, and the wild card spots right now. And then the Vikings, Bears, and 49ers. I'm not sure what's going on with the 49ers and why they're below the Bears somehow, but anything could happen, especially in the era of the COVID season and with the new wildcard spot. So I think that there's going to be a surprise playoff team from both conferences that nobody expected at the beginning of the year or even now.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever team that comes out of the NFC East is definitely going to be a surprise team because either the Giants or the football team, two teams that haven't won the division in at least 5 years for either of the two. So it's going to be must-see TV from here on out, no doubt about that. And prep basketball is going to be must-see TV as well, so make sure you tune in on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Creighton Prep TV. Junior Jay's taking on Grand Island for the season opener, and hopefully all of you stay safe out there. We can't wait to bring the game to you. Yep, so definitely going to be a fun season, and we will keep you updated on all things sports, college, pro, and high school. For Brendan Preisman, I'm Tyler Reedy saying so long for this episode, and we'll see you next time.